A very good evening to one and all. Let me begin by introducing myself. I'm Satvika Krishnan, a research associate at the Environment Support Group Bangalore. I'm happy to welcome all of you to the fifth webinar in the series, Bangalore's Climate Plan, Making It Participatory and Inclusive, organized by ESG. This series was conceptualized based on the Bruhat Bangalore Mahanagara Palike's decision to take action under the Paris Climate Agreement. In each session, we invite leading administrators, experts, and representatives from affected communities to introspect on what the city's climate action plan must contain so that the challenges of decarbonization are met in a just and equitable manner. Following the inaugural session on the 22nd of March, each weekly session interrogates sectoral issues so that a collective action plan can be evolved for making Bangalore climate friendly. Last week's session witnessed extensive discussion on the topic Food for Thought towards an environmentally sustainable and socially just food system. In today's session, we will be discussing how securing biodiversity rich, healthy, socially inclusive, and economically viable commons in Bangalore forms a critical aspect of building a climate action plan for the city. Where one lives and how defines access to sufficient and qualitatively rich space and resilience to climate change impacts. A city's commons helps people identify, relate, and connect with the local community and the city. The quality of the commons determines how livable the city is. Bangalore has transformed from being a pensioner's paradise into a busy and highly built metropolis. Bangalore evolved out of the merger of two cities, the Indian Peat and the British Cantonment, which was spread by what we now know as the Cubbon Park. The world-renowned Lal Bagh Botanical Gardens evolved from Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan's efforts, later Krumbegal and Mari Gauda. But these were spaces ultimately crafted and maintained by the Tigala community, who were naturally honed and extremely skilled gardeners. During the Mysore Maharaja's rule and also in decades subsequent to India's freedom, networks of roads and commons were so designed and designated that they interacted in interesting ways, creating distinctive spaces for sports, music, culture, advancing gardening, building biodiversity, etc. M.N. Krishna Rao Park in Basavangudi, south of Bangalore, was even designed initially exclusively for use by women and children. Lakes, for instance, have from centuries been spaces for harvesting surface runoff and rain, yes, but they also were sites of village fairs, circuses, sports events, or served simply as pasture lands when water receded during summer. Yet, the specter of caste played a heavy hand on who accessed such commons. Following the creation of Bangalore Development Authority in 1976, the rush to create neighborhoods for housing from farmlands resulted in a widespread destruction of parks and lakes as commons in the built Bangalore and also in the suburbs. In recent decades, intense financialization of land has resulted in the eruption of high rises and high end villas everywhere as gated colonies. The idea of the public parks and open spaces has quickly eroded in the process, leaving the urban poor and the working classes with little or no access to public commons. Ornamental parks are being retrofitted more as an afterthought, but they have little possibility of serving as networks of roads and commons for people to connect, de stress, feel included, and stay healthy. Several old streets, which were turned into boulevards with lovely nurturing of flowering trees and bushes, whose canopies provided shelter to pedestrians, street vendors, and motorists, and also served as wildlife corridors, are being dismembered and recast as concretized zones. Large populations of sparrows, parakeets, cuckoos, barbets, mynas, herons, crows, who claim many of these tree lined avenues as theirs, are no more to be seen now. Finding a mongoose in the backyard, monkeys on the rooftops, or even a slender loris occasionally was common. This helped people connect with nature. Emerging research has shown that being consistently connected with diversity of nature is an important aspect of public health and advances well-being. In highly urbanized spaces like Bengaluru, such connection with nature is largely dependent on the quality of the public spaces. How we plan, design, protect, maintain, and manage, making it accessible to all, regardless of how wealthy or poor one is. Streets, as our first commons, call our attention when they are cannibalized for a variety of reasons, particularly to accommodate more cars and less pedestrians and street vendors who bring safety and character to the streets. Encroachment of public commons, be they roads, streets, parks, and open spaces, even forests and lakes, is resulting in widespread deterioration of the quality of life, especially for the poor. The loss of greenery across the metropolis has been catastrophic. Livelihoods associated with public spaces, say of street vendors, are threatened increasingly, while an evolving urban aesthetic fails to comprehend urban forests and controversially turns them into tree parks. Densely crowded, polluted, non inclusive, and stress inducing concretized spaces are making neighborhoods increasingly vulnerable to various impacts of climate change, such as flooding and the heat island effects. While the former results in avoidable loss of life and property, the latter induces increased consumption of energy and water to keep building school with ACs, an ironical development in a city not too long ago considered one of the most naturally air conditioned. Are what are offered as solutions really addressing these problems? In today's discussion, our panel will address how Bangalore is rushing down the path of contributing to climate change and what we can do to turn the metropolis around to reverse that trend. The focus on commons, therefore, is to highlight the critical urgency of securing those that were handed down to us, ensure more are created for our needs and that of the future, and ensure they are inclusive, biodiversity rich, and flowing with healthy spaces for all. Before we go further, I would like to quickly go over the format of today's discussion. Each of the speakers will be giving a brief intervention of about 10 minutes, followed by a round of questions and answers towards the end of the session after all speakers have finished presenting their views. Anyone wishing to ask a question is requested to do so by posting the question in the chat box below. Please forgive us if we're unable to cover all questions asked. We will try our best to address as many questions as possible based on the availability of time left. We have four esteemed speakers for today's discussion. Our first speaker is Mr. Anant Hegde, the present chairman of Karnataka Biodiversity Board. By profession, he is a progressive farmer, respected environmentalist, and committed to social service. He has more than 4 decades of experience in working for the cause of conservation of natural resources, both at grassroots level and policy advocacy fronts. He was the chairman of Western Ghats Task Force, constituted by the government of Karnataka during the period between 2008 and 13 as a special purpose committee to design and implement conservation actions in Western Ghats of Karnataka. In this capacity, he initiated government schemes like the Devara Kadu Samrakshana Yojane, which is the Sacred Grove Conservation Scheme, Karavali Hasiru Kavacha Yojane, a scheme for arresting beach erosion in the seafront, etc. He is also responsible for establishing and empowering grassroots level organizations like the village forest committees, school eco clubs, tribal groups, etc., for the cause of forest protection and sustainable development. His lifelong commitment for the cause and contributions are recognized by many civil society felicitations and awards like the Pari Sarashri Award, the Environment Award of the Government of Karnataka in 2003. So I'd like you to please address our participants for today.
Okay. We'll start now. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಜೀವ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯದ ಸಂರಕ್ಷಣೆ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಎನ್ವಿರಾನ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ನಡೆಸ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಈ ಒಂದು ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸುವುದಕ್ಕೆ ನನಗೆ ಸಂತೋಷ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಅಟ್ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟ್ ಈಗ ಜೀವ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯ ಮಂಡಳಿಯ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷನಾಗಿ, ಒಬ್ಬ ಪರಿಸರ ಕಾರ್ಯಕರ್ತನಾಗಿ ನಾನು ಈ ಒಂದು ಗೋಷ್ಠಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ಹಲವಾರು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಪರಿಸರ ಸಂರಕ್ಷಣೆಯ ವಿಷಯದ ಜನಾಂದೋಲನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮತ್ತು ನ್ಯಾಯಾಲಯಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋರಾಟ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ಸಂದರ್ಭಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಎನ್ವಿರಾನ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ಹಲವು ರೀತಿಯ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನಗಳನ್ನ ಏನ್ ನಡೆಸಿದೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಮೊಟ್ಟ ಮೊದಲು ನಾನು ಅಭಿನಂದಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಮತ್ತು ಇವತ್ತು ತಾವು ಪರಿಸರದ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರದ ತಜ್ಞರುಗಳು ಭಾಗವಹಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಈ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿ ಯಶಸ್ವಿ ಆಗ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ಹಾರೈಸ್ತೇನೆ ಮತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲ ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರಿಗೆ ಶುಭವನ್ನ ಕೋರ್ತೇನೆ. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಗೋಷ್ಠಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಆರಂಭದಲ್ಲೇನೆ 13 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಪದ್ಮನಾಭ ನಗರದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು 3 ಎಕರೆ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಂತ ಅವರು ಬೆಳೆಸಿರುವಂತಹ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಅಪರೂಪದ ಸಸ್ಯ ರಾಶಿಯನ್ನ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಆಕೆ ಅರೌಂಡ್ 65 ಅಷ್ಟು ಸೀನಿಯರ್ ಸಿಟಿಜನ್ ಅವರು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಲಲಿತಮ್ಮ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವರನ್ನ ನೆನಪು ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನವನ್ನ ಹಾಕಿದ್ವಿ, ಭಾಗಶಃ ಯಶಸ್ವಿ ಕೂಡ ಆದ್ವಿ. ಅಲ್ಲೊಂದು ಅಪರೂಪದ ಒಂದು ಕಾಡನ್ನೇ ನಿರ್ಮಿಸಿದ್ರು. 35 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ತಪಸ್ಸನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಒಂದು 10-15 ಜನ ನಾಗರಿಕರು ಸೇರಿ ಕಟ್ಟಿಕೊಂಡಿರುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ವೇದಿಕೆ, ಒಂದು ಚಿಕ್ಕದಾದಂತಹ ಗುಡಿ, ಅದರ ಸುತ್ತ ಇರುವಂತಹದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಕಾಡು. ಇದನ್ನ ದೊಡ್ಡದಾಗಿ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿಯ ಮಹಾನಗರ ಪಾಲಿಕೆಯವರು ಮುಂದೆ ಬಂದರು. ಆ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಹೋರಾಟಗಳನ್ನ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಲಲಿತಮ್ಮ ನೇತೃತ್ವದ ಆ ಒಂದು ಗುಂಪು ಅವರು ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ಗೆ ಕೂಡ ಹೋದ್ರು, ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ಗೆ ಅಪೀಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು, ಹಲವು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನಗಳನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಮಾಡಿ ಭಾಗಶಃ ಯಶಸ್ಸನ್ನ ಪಡೆದ್ರು. ನಾನು ಅದರ ಜೊತೆಗೇನೆ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ನಗರ ಸಭೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಪಟ್ಟಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ಮಹಾನಗರ ಪಾಲಿಕೆಗಳ ಜೀವ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯ ಸಮಿತಿಗಳ ಸಭೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿರುವಂತಹ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಂದರ್ಭಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡೋ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೊಂದು ಸಮುದ್ರ, ಇಲ್ಲಿಯ ಪರಿಸರದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಇಲ್ಲಿಯ ಜೀವ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯತೆ ಉಳಿವಿನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹದ್ದು ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟಕರ ಸಂಗತಿ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಪಕ್ಕಕ್ಕಿಟ್ಟು ನಾವು ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಬೇರೆ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳ ಸಂರಕ್ಷಣೆ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲೂ ನಾವು, ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಅತಿ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾನವ ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲ ಅಥವಾ ಇತರ ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲಗಳ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಇಡೀ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಅನ್ನುವಂತ ಕೆಲವು ಸಂದರ್ಭಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಹತಾಶೆಯ ಮಾತನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಾನು ಆಡಿದ್ದೆ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ತಾವು ಈ ಆರಂಭದಲ್ಲಿ ತಿಳಿಸಿರೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಇದೊಂದು ಅದ್ಭುತವಾದಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಜೀವ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯತೆಯ ಪ್ರದೇಶ ಆಗಿ ಅದು ಈಗ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ವಿನಾಶದ ಅಂಚಿಗೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಸರಿ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಇದನ್ನು ಉಳಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯವೇ? ಇದೊಂದು ಲೂಸಿಂಗ್ ಬ್ಯಾಟ್ಲ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆಯೇ? ಬ್ಯಾಟ್ಲ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಹೇಳ್ತೇವೆ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಉಳಿದಿರೋದನ್ನಾದ್ರೂ ಉಳಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು ಹೆಂಗೆ? ಪಶ್ಚಿಮ ಘಟ್ಟದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇದೇ ಮಾತನ್ನ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತೇವೆ. ಪಶ್ಚಿಮ ಘಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ನಾವು ಕಳ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೀವಿ, ಹೇಗಾದ್ರೂ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಸಂರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಡೀಮ್ಡ್ ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ನದಿ ಕಣಿವೆಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಮೆಜೆಸ್ಟಿಕಾ ಸ್ವಯಂಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಯಾವ ಅಪರೂಪದ ನದಿ ಮೂಲಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವಲ್ಲದೆ ಇದ್ರೆ ಆ ಪ್ರದೇಶದ ಜನಗಳು ಜಾಗೃತರಾಗಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಸಂರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡದೇ ಇದ್ರೆ ಇನ್ಯಾರು ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು? ಸೊ ಆ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ನಾವು ಸರ್ಕಾರಗಳ ಮೇಲೆ ಒತ್ತಡ ಹಾಕಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ, ನ್ಯಾಯಾಲಯಗಳಿಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಾಗ್ತದೆ ಮತ್ತು ಈ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ ನಿರಂತರವಾಗಿ ಜನಗಳ ಸಂಘಟನೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಅದೇ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಲವಾರು ಸಂಘಟನೆಗಳು ಗಿಡಗಳನ್ನ ನೆಡೋದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ, ವೃಕ್ಷಾರೋಪಣ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಕಾಡುಗಳ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಕೆರೆಗಳ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಮುಖಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಾನು ಅವರನ್ನ ತುಂಬು ಹೃದಯದಿಂದ ಅಭಿನಂದಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಬಂಧುಗಳೇ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಕಮಿಟಿಗಳು ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಕಾಯ್ದೆಯ ಅಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ, ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಡಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ರಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ನಾನು ಅದರ ಸಭೆಯನ್ನ BBMP ನಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಸಭೆ ನಡೆಸಿದಾಗ, ಅದು ಹಲವು ವರ್ಷಗಳಾಗಿದೆ ರಚನೆ ಆದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಆ ಸಭೆಯನ್ನ ನಡೆಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು BBMP ಸೇರ್ಕೊಂಡಾಗೆ ಈ ಮಹಾನಗರ ಪಾಲಿಕೆಗಳು ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಆದ್ಯತೆಯನ್ನ ಕೊಟ್ಟೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಮತ್ತು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾದಂತಹ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥಿತವಾದಂತಹ ಯೋಜನೆಗಳನ್ನ ರೂಪಿಸೇನೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಇಂಥ ಯೋಜನೆಗಳನ್ನ, ಆಕ್ಷನ್ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ರಚನೆ ಮಾಡದೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ, ರೂಪಿಸದೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಹೇಗೆ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿನ ಉಳಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇದೆ? ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸರ್ಕಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಪ್ಲಾನಿಂಗ್ ಡಿಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನಿರಂತರವಾಗಿ ಸಸ್ಟೈನಬಲ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡೆಲ್ಸ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ, ಗೋಲ್ಸ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅದರ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲಾ ಮುನ್ಸಿಪಲ್ ಬಾಡೀಸ್ BBMP ಸೇರಿ ನಾವು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಯೋಜನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಸಸ್ಟೈನಬಲ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡೆಲ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಪ್ರಮುಖವಾದಂತಹ ಪಾತ್ರ ವಹಿಸುತ್ತದೆ, ತಮ್ಗೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ. ಈ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ನಾವು ಮಹಾನಗರ ಸಭೆ ಪಾಲಿಕೆ ಮೇಲೆ, BBMP ಮೇಲೆ ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಕಮಿಟಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಕ್ರಿಯಾಶೀಲವಾಗಿ ತನ್ನ ಕೆಲಸಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಜಾಗೃತಿಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇದೆ. ಜೀವ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯ ಮಂಡಳಿಯ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷನಾಗಿ ಆ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಪರಿಣಾಮಕಾರಿಯಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಂತ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನವನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ತಮ್ಮ ಈ ಸಭೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಗಮನ ಸೆಳೆದಿರುವಂತದ್ದು, ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರುವಂತದ್ದು, ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ಗಳು ಆದೇಶಗಳನ್ನು ಕೊಡ್ತವೆ, ತಜ್ಞರ ಸಮಿತಿಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತವೆ, ಕೆರೆಗಳು ಎಲ್ಲಾನು ಹಾಳಾಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದಾವೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಆ ಕೆರೆಗಳ ಸಂರಕ್ಷಣೆ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವ್ ಯಾರು ಹೇಳುವಂತದ್ದೇನಿಲ್ಲ. ಈಗ ಕೆರೆ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ಪ್ರಾಧಿಕಾರ ಇದೆ, ಅದು ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಕ್ರಿಯಾಶೀಲ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು. ಈ ರಾಜ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ನಮ್ಮ ಆ ಕೆರೆಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ವಿಂಡೋ ಆಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕೆರೆ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ಪ್ರಾಧಿಕಾರ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇದು ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಶಕ್ತಿ ತುಂಬಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇದೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಂತೆ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲಾ ಕೆರೆಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನಗಳು ನಡೆದಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ನಾನು ಬೇರೆ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಗಳ ಅಥವಾ ಬೇರೆ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳೋದಾದ್ರೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ವ್ಯಾಪಕವಾಗಿ ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹಣವನ್ನ ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ನಾನು ದಾವಣಗೆರೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿರುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಉದಾಹರಣೆಯನ್ನ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ಮುಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗ್ತೇನೆ. ಕೆರೆಯ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ಪಡಿಸ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಕೆರೆಯ ನೀರನ್ನೆಲ್ಲಾನು ತೆಗೆದ್ಬಿಟ್ರು. ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಜಲಚರಗಳೇ ಸತ್ತೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ವು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಯಾರು ಆ ಒಂದು ಪರಿಸರ ಪ್ರಿಯರಿದ್ರು ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ಲಕ್ಷ್ಯವನ್ನೇ ಹಾಕ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಮಹಾನಗರ ಪಾಲಿಕೆಯವರು ಅದರ ಏನೊಂದು ಕೆರೆಯನ್ನ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ಪಡಿಸುವಂತಹ ಯೋಜನೆ ಒಳಗೆ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಕಾಂಕ್ರೀಟೀಕರಣ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಈ ಕೆರೆಗಳ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ದೇನೆಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಕಾಂಕ್ರೀಟೀಕರಣ ಬಹಳ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು. ಅದ್ರ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತ ಗಿಡಗಳು ಬರಬೇಕು, ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಏನು ಹೂಳು ತೆಗಿಬೇಕು, ಇವೆಲ್ಲವೂ ಸರಿ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಆ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಅತಿಯಾದ ಕಾಂಕ್ರೀಟೀಕರಣ ಮಾಡಿ ನಾವು ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಜಲಚರಗಳ ನಾಶಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾರಣ ಆಗ್ತವೆ. ಆ ಕೆರೆಯ ಮೂಲ ಒಂದು ನೈಸರ್ಗಿಕವಾದಂತಹ ಸ್ವರೂಪ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಧಕ್ಕೆ ತರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಆಗಲಾರದ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಕೆರೆಗಳು ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಒಂದು ನೈಸರ್ಗಿಕ ತಾಣವಾಗಿ, ಜೈವಿಕ ತಾಣವಾಗಿ ಇರಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ ಆದಷ್ಟು ಅದನ್ನು ಪಾಡಿಗೆ ಬಿಡೋ ಹಾಗಾಗ್ಬೇಕು. ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಯಾರು ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಂತಹ ಅದು ಮಹಾನಗರ ಪಾಲಿಕೆ ಇರ್ಲಿ, ಆ ಯೋಜನಾ ಕರ್ತರಿರ್ಲಿ, ಅವ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ನಾವು ಒತ್ತಾಯವನ್ನ ತರಬೇಕಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಬಹಳ ಆತಂಕದ ಸಂಗತಿ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಖಾಲಿ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಪ್ಲಾಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಮಯ, ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಖಾಲಿ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಕಸದಿಂದಾನೇ ತುಂಬೋಗಿರ್ತವೆ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಯಾವುದೇ ಖಾಲಿ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳಿಗೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಣುವಂತಹದ್ದು ಬರೀ ಕಸಗಳ ರಾಶಿ. ಸೊ ಇದನ್ನ ತೆಗೆದು ಇದನ್ನ ಮಹಾನಗರ ಪಾಲಿಕೆ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿ ಇದೆ ಕಸವನ್ನ ವಿಲೇವಾರಿ ಮಾಡುವಂತದ್ದು. ಅದರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಆ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಖಾಲಿ ಇರುವಂತಹದ್ದು 2 ಎಕರೆ ಇರಲಿ 50 ಎಕರೆ ಇರಲಿ ಅದನ್ನ ವನೀಕರಣ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ವಿಶೇಷವಾದಂತಹ ಕಾಳಜಿಯನ್ನು ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕು. ಬೇರೆ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳಿಗೆ ಹಣದ ಅಭಾವ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಬಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ಪಂಚಾಯತ್ಗಳಿಗೆ ಹಣದ ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಗಲ್ಲ, ಮಹಾನಗರ ಪಾಲಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಸಾವಿರ ಕೋಟಿಗಳ ಯೋಜನೆಗಳಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ಈ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ವನೀಕರಣಕ್ಕೆ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಪ್ರಾಶಸ್ತ್ಯವನ್ನು ಕೊಡಬೇಕಾದಂತಹ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇದೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಅಷ್ಟು ಒತ್ತಾಯಗಳನ್ನು ಹಾಕಬೇಕಾದಂತಹ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇದೆ. ಕೆಲವಾದ್ರೂ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳನ್ನ ಗುರುತಿಸಿ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ ಇಂತಹ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಕನಿಷ್ಠ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ನೇರವಾಗಿ ನಿರ್ದಿಷ್ಟವಾದಂತಹ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳನ್ನ ಗುರುತಿಸಿ ಅವ್ರು ಯಾರು ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳು, ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಇಲಾಖೆನ, ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆನ, ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ದೇವಾಲಯದ ಸಮಿತಿನ, ಆ ಜಾಗ ಯಾರದ್ದಿದೆ ಅಥವಾ ಯಾವ್ದೋ ಒಂದು ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಿದ್ಯಾ, ಖಾಲಿ ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ರೋರಿಕ್ ದೇವಿಕಾರಾಣಿ ಎಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಹತ್ರ 1,000 ಎಕರೆ ಪ್ರದೇಶ ಖಾಲಿ ಬಿದ್ದಿದೆ, ಯಾವ್ದೋ ಒಬ್ರದ್ದು ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲಿಸ್ಟ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಈ ತರ ಹಲವಾರು ಇಂತಹ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳನ್ನ ಖಾಲಿ ಬಿಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರಾದ್ರೂ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿ, ಖಾಸಗಿಯಾಗಿ ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್ಕಾರನಾದ್ರೂ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿ, ವನೀಕರಣ ಮೊದಲು ಆಗ್ಲೇಬೇಕು. ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಜಲಮೂಲ ಇದೆ, ಕೆರೆಗಳಿದಾವೆ, ಚಿಕ್ಕದಾದಂತಹ ಹಳ್ಳಗಳಿದಾವೆ, ಅವುಗಳಿಗೆ ಸಂಪೂರ್ಣವಾದಂತಹ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು. ಈ ಕೆಲಸವನ್ನ ನಿರ್ದಿಷ್ಟವಾಗಿ ಮಹಾನಗರ ಪಾಲಿಕೆಯವರು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಅಥವಾ ಆ ವಾರ್ಡ್ ನಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರಜ್ಞಾವಂತ ನಾಗರಿಕರು ಮುಂದೆ ಬಂದು ಗುಂಪುಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಕೆಲವರು ಹೋರಾಟ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಮಹತ್ವ ಸಿಗೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ಇದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹಲವಾರು, ನಾನು ಆಗಲೇ ಹೇಳಿದೆ, ಜೈವಿಕ ತಾಣಗಳು ಇದ್ದಾವೆ ಅಂತೇಳಿ. ಹೆಸರುಘಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಹುಲ್ಲುಗಾವಲುಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ವನ್ಯಜೀವಿ ಸಂರಕ್ಷಿತ ಪ್ರದೇಶ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರಸ್ತಾವನೆ ಇತ್ತು. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಈಗ ಯಾವುದು ನಮ್ಮ ಹಲವಾರು ನಮ್ಮ ಇದರ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳು ಏನು ಹುಣಸೆ ತೋಪನ್ನ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ 15 ವರ್ಷದ 2010-11 ಡಿಕ್ಲೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿತು ಇದನ್ನ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಹೆರಿಟೇಜ್ ಸೈಟ್ ಅಂತ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊಸಕೋಟೆಯ ಕೆರೆಯ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾನು ಉಲ್ಲೇಖ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. ದಾಬಸ್ಪೇಟೆ ಹತ್ರ ನರಸೀಪುರದ ಒಂದು ಕೆರೆಯನ್ನ ಸಂರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ನಾವು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಗ್ರಾಮ ಪಂಚಾಯತದ, ಅದು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಗ್ರಾಮಾಂತರ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ಯೋಜನೆಯನ್ನು ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಂಡ್ವಿ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ನೆಲಮಂಗಲ ಆ ಪ್ರದೇಶದ ಒಂದು ಬೆಟ್ಟ ಇದೆ, ಮಹಿಮಾ ರಂಗದ ಬೆಟ್ಟ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಆ ಬೆಟ್ಟವನ್ನ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಹೆರಿಟೇಜ್ ಒಂದು ಸೈಟ್ ಅಂತ ಘೋಷಣೆ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ನಿರ್ಣಯವನ್ನ ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಂಡು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಉದಾಹರಣೆಯನ್ನ ಜನರು ಮಾಡಿರುವಂತಹದನ್ನ, ಒಂದು ಧಾರ್ಮಿಕ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಮಾಡಿರುವ ಉದಾಹರಣೆಯನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಶಿವೇನಹಳ್ಳಿಯ ರಾಮಕೃಷ್ಣಾಶ್ರಮದ ಸ್ವಾಮೀಜಿ ಸುಮಾರು 300 ಎಕರೆ ಪಶ್ಚಿಮ ಘಟ್ಟದನ್ನೇ ತಂದು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕಟ್ಟಿ ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅಷ್ಟು ಅಪರೂಪದ ಗಿಡಗಳನ್ನ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಓಡಾಡಿ 10, 25, 30 ವರ್ಷ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿ ಗಿಡಗಳನ್ನು ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಳೆಸಿ ಎದ್ದು ಕಾಣೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ದೊಡ್ಡದೊಂದು ಸಾಹಸ. ನಮ್ ಸುತ್ತ ಸಮೀಪದಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತ ಈ ಬನ್ನೇರ್ಘಟ್ಟ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಉದ್ಯಾನವನ ಇದೆ. ಇದು ಒಂದು ಅವಾಗಿನ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲೇ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು. ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಕೊಡಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ. ಯಾಕೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಪ್ರಸ್ತಾಪ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಇಷ್ಟು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಕಾಂಕ್ರೀಟ್ ಜಗತ್ತಿನ ಸುತ್ತ ಗ್ರೀನ್ ಬೆಲ್ಟ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತೇವೆ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಗ್ರೀನ್ ಬೆಲ್ಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿದೆ? ನಾವು ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಮಾಗಡಿ ರಸ್ತೆನಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಆ ಮಾಗಡಿ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ತಿಪ್ಪಗೊಂಡನಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಕೆರೆ, ಆ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತಲಿನ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳು ಕುರ್ಚಲಾಗಿದ್ದಾವೆ, ಹಾಳಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ, ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ನಾಶ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ತಡೆಯೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಮಾಡ್ಲೇಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ಡೀಮ್ಡ್ ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಇದೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ನಾವು. ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತಲಿನ ಈ ಗ್ರೀನ್ ಬೆಲ್ಟ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೆಲ್ಲ ಬರ್ತವೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಗ್ರಾಮಾಂತರದ ಅರಣ್ಯ ಇಲಾಖೆಯವರು, ಅರ್ಬನ್ ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಏನು ಡಿಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಇದೆ ಅವರು, BBMP ಅವರು, ಆ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ತಾಲೂಕ್ ಪಂಚಾಯತ್ ಮತ್ತು ಜಿಲ್ಲಾ ಪಂಚಾಯತ್ ಅವರು, ಇವರು ಸೇರಿ ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕ ಅರಣ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಬೆಳೆಸೋ ದಿಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಂದೆ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ಇಡೋ ಹಾಗೆ, ಯೋಜನೆ ರೂಪಿಸೋ ಹಾಗೆ ನಾವು ಈ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತಲಿನ ಪ್ರದೇಶದವರು ಯಾರು ನಾಗರಿಕರಿದ್ದೇವೆ ನಾವೇ ಒತ್ತಡವನ್ನು ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಯಾರು ಇದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕಾಳಜಿ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಇವತ್ತು ನಾವು ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡದಾದ ಚಾಲೆಂಜ್ ಅನ್ನು ಎದುರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ ಈ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿಯ ಜಗತ್ತಿನಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ದೇವನಹಳ್ಳಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾನು ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು. ಆ ದೇವನಹಳ್ಳಿ ಆ ಪ್ರದೇಶ ಇಡೀ ಪ್ರದೇಶ ಬಯಲು ಸೀಮೆಯಾಗಿ ಮಾರ್ಪಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೃಷಿ ಭೂಮಿನೇ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಇದೆ. ಆ ತೆಂಗಿನ ಗಿಡಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಒಣಗಿ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ಏನೂ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರುವಂತಹದ್ದು ಕಲ್ಲಿನ ಗುಡ್ಡಗಳು, ಅರ್ಧ ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರುವಂತಹ ಗುಡ್ಡಗಳಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ಹೇಗಾದ್ರೂ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹಸಿರನ್ನು ಎಲ್ಲಾದ್ರೂ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಕಡೆ ತಪ್ಪಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಆ ಕೃಷಿ ಭೂಮಿ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳು ಅಥವಾ ಅದು ಎಣೆಯಾಗಿ ಕೃಷಿ ಹೊರತಾಗಿರುವಂತಹ ಭೂಮಿ ಕೆಲವು ಬಿದ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ಇದನ್ನ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿ ಪಡಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಎಷ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಒಂದು ಪ್ಯಾಚ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವ್ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು, ಇದು ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆರಿಟೇಜ್ ಟ್ರೀಸ್ ಡಿಕ್ಲೇರ್ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನವನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಕೆಲವಾದ್ರೂ ಮಾಡೆಲ್ಸ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ತೋರಿಸುವಂತ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನವನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ಈ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಕೃಷಿ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯ ಕ್ಯಾಂಪಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ 300 ಎಕರೆ ಅರಣ್ಯಕ್ಕೇನೆ ನಾವು ನೈಸರ್ಗಿಕವಾಗಿರುವಂತಹ ಅರಣ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಜೈವಿಕ ತಾಣ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ವಿ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಿಟಿನಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಅಪರೂಪದ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ ಇದೆ, ಅದರ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಇವತ್ತು ಹೋರಾಟ ನಡೀತಿದೆ. ಅದರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಈ ನಾನು ಪ್ರಸ್ತಾಪ ಮಾಡಿರುವಂತಹ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತಲಿನ ಈ ಒಂದು ಹಸಿರು ಪಟ್ಟಿ ಹಾಳಾಗಿದೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡೋ ದಿಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಕೆಲಸಗಳಾಗ್ಬೇಕು. ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಹಸಿರನ್ನ ಗಿಡಗಳನ್ನ ನರ್ಸರಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡುವಂತ BBMP ನಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಅರಣ್ಯದ ವಿಭಾಗ ಇದೆ ಸರಿ, ನರ್ಸರಿ ಗಿಡಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಸರಿ, ಆದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ಗಳು ಸಾವಿರಾರು ಪಾರ್ಕ್ಗಳಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ಆ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ವೃಕ್ಷಗಳಿರ್ಬೇಕು, ಹಲವು ಪರ್ಮನೆಂಟ್ ಟ್ರೀಸ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ದೀರ್ಘಕಾಲಿಕವಾಗಿರುವಂತದ್ದು, ಕೇವಲ ಗ್ರಾಸ್ ಬಳಸುವಂತಹದ್ದಲ್ಲ. ಆ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ಕೆಲಸ, ನಮ್ಮ ನೀತಿ ಒಂದು ದೀರ್ಘಕಾಲಿಕವಾದಂತಹ ಸುಸ್ಥಿರ ಅಭಿವೃದ್ಧಿಯ ನೀತಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಗೆ ಬರಬೇಕು. ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದು ಕೇವಲ ಜೀವ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯತೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಕೇವಲ ಗಿಡ ಮರಗಳ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಇಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಆ ಕೆರೆಗಳು, ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಹಳ್ಳಗಳು, ಆ ಅಪರೂಪದ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತಲು ಇರುವಂತಹ ಬೆಟ್ಟಗಳೇನಿದೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಏನು ಸಾವನ್ದುರ್ಗ ಒಂದು ಬೆಟ್ಟ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಮೆಡಿಸಿನಲ್ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ ಕನ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ ಏರಿಯಾ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅರಣ್ಯ ಇಲಾಖೆ ಮೂಲಕ ಒಂದು ಟ್ಯಾಗ್ ಕೊಟ್ವಿ, ಅದಕ್ಕೊಂದು ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಕೊಟ್ವಿ. ಆ ಪ್ರದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಬಹಳ ಇದೊಂದು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಹತ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ, ನಂದಿ ಬೆಟ್ಟ ಇದೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅತಿಯಾದ ಪ್ರವಾಸೋದ್ಯಮದ ಹೆಸರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಆ ಬೆಟ್ಟಗಳನ್ನ ಕಡಿದೇ ಹೋದಾಗ, ಆ ಬೆಟ್ಟಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇವಲ ರಸ್ತೆಗಳೇ ಕಾಣೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಅಥವಾ ಕಟ್ಟಡಗಳೇ ಇರೋ ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ನೈಸರ್ಗಿಕ ಆ ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲ, ಇದರ ಸುತ್ತ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಈ ಸಪ್ತ ನದಿಗಳು, ಆ ಪ್ರದೇಶಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬಯಲುಸೀಮೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಆ ನದಿಗಳೇ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಇವತ್ತು ನದಿಗಳೇ ಕಾಣೋದೇ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತಲು ಇರುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರದೇಶದ ಮಾಲಿನ್ಯವನ್ನ ತಡೆಯೋ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ, ಈ ಪ್ಲಾಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಮಯವಾದಂತಹ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರನ್ನು ತಡೆಯೋ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ನಮಗೆ ಬೇಕು ಈ ಜೀವ ವೈವಿಧ್ಯ ಸಂರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡುವಂತ, ಬೆಳೆಸುವಂತ, ಈ ನೈಸರ್ಗಿಕ ಸಂಪನ್ಮೂಲಗಳನ್ನ ರಕ್ಷಣೆ ಮಾಡುವಂತ ಒಂದು ಸಸ್ಟೈನಬಲ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡೆಲ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಗೆ ಬೇಕು. ಇದನ್ನ BBMP ಮುಖಾಂತರ, ಇಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ವಿವಿಧ ಇಲಾಖೆಗಳ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ನಾವು ಈ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿರುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರಜ್ಞಾವಂತ ನಾಗರಿಕರು ಮುಂದೆ ನಿಂತು ಆ ಯೋಜನೆಗಳು ಜಾರಿ ಆಗೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಎನ್ನುವಂತಹ ಅಪೇಕ್ಷೆಯನ್ನ ತಮ್ಮ ಮುಂದೆ ಮಂಡಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ಮಿತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಮೂಲಕ, ಬಹಳ ಮಿತಿ ಇದೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ, ಆ ಬಯೋಡೈವರ್ಸಿಟಿ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಕೆಲವಾದ್ರೂ ಚಿಕ್ಕದಾದ್ರೂ ಕೆಲವು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನಗಳನ್ನ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನವನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಈ ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಪಾಲ್ಗೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನನಗೆ ತಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕಲ್ಪಿಸಿದಿರಿ. ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೆ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತೇನೆ.
Thank you so much, sir. I request Bhargavi to provide a quick translation for the benefit of those joining from outside Bangalore or Karnataka.
Yeah, thank you, Satvika. Mr. Ashishar Hegde has spoken in such beautiful chaste Kannada. I don't know if I will be able to do complete justice to it, but ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ನನ್ನ ಕ್ಷಮಿಸಿ. ನೀವೇ ಹೇಳಿದ ಕೆಲವು ಪದಗಳನ್ನ ನಾನು ಅದೇ ಥರ ಅನುವಾದ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗುತ್ತಲ್ವ, ಬಟ್ ಐಲ್ ಟ್ರೈ. So Mr. Ashishar Hegde basically said that Bangalore's biodiversity, in the context of Bangalore's biodiversity conservation, ESG has been doing a lot of work, and he's very happy about it. And at present, as a member of the biodiversity board and as somebody who's been part of the biodiversity movement, somebody who's involved in it, He has spent a lot of time understanding and being part of these movements in court interventions, and he's also aware of many of the ESG's efforts, and he applauds ESG's work. Then he started off by saying that he gives his greetings to everybody who's been here as part of this webinar. And he quoted one particular example where 13 years back, a small patch of uh, green that was created by a 65-year-old woman whose name is Lalitama, and her neighborhood friends, about 10 to 15 people got together, and they had started growing rare medicinal and other plants and trees. And this patch of land also had a small little temple, and she fought very hard to save it as a biodiversity heritage site. And he was with her in it, and because of her many efforts, both in terms of dialoguing with the biodiversity board, with the BBMP, and she also went to court. Today that patch is left. I live in Padmanabh Nagar, that's where I go for my morning walk, so I know the entire story. But yes, it starts with citizens like her. So that was the context in which he brought that example. And because of that, today that little patch of greenery remains, although BBMP came forward and converted that into a park. And they have poured a lot of steel, cement, concrete, tiles, everything out there. So he also said that Bangalore's biodiversity is like an ocean, and to save all of it is very difficult. Just like in other districts, also there is so much. And then to address these challenges, there are many ways, and can we save it is a question, and is it a losing battle is another thing that often comes to mind. And he also referred to the efforts that have gone on in Western Ghats, because he's been a very key person in trying to save the Western Ghats. And he also mentioned how in Western Ghats, a whole lot of very rare plants are gone, and also a lot of rivers and streams and very sensitive spots have been destroyed. And if we don't do it as people, as citizens, who else will, was a question he put forth to this group. And then in the same context, he said that we all have to be part of all the movements that are happening in the context of saving these biodiversity. It is imperative that we have to go to court to protect these natural resources. And yes, he also acknowledged that there are many planting of saplings that go on. And he also mentioned that the biodiversity management committees are established, but then it has been very challenging to ensure that they meet and to conduct the BMC meetings. He referred to the lack of proper schemes and action plans to save the biodiversity. He stressed on the need, on the fact that the planning department has continuously stressed the SDGs, the various plans, actions, and models, but despite that, uh, there's very little that has been done. And so it's our duty as citizens to make sure BBMP and the BMCs function and make them work in a very effective and efficient way in the context of biodiversity, and also ensure that the many court orders and committees that are set up in the context of lakes or biodiversity or other such natural resources, it's important that we make them accountable, we make them function, and we make them do the work for which they have been set up for. He also mentioned that a whole lot of money has been allotted to this kind of work, but that has not translated into the protection of these natural resources. He also mentioned about an example in Davangere where, in a particular lake, all the water was removed in the context of rejuvenation, but then the Davangere Municipal Mahanagara Palike did not do much other than pouring cement and concrete out there. So he referred to the fact that concretization is killing lakes everywhere, and this is not the right way to go about protecting lakes. Lakes have to be kept natural, and they have to be left alone. And the concerned authorities should be pressurized to do it the way that is just to the lakes and such natural bodies. And all empty spaces also, he referred to the fact that today in any empty space there are lots of plastic and other garbage, and he said that BBMP is responsible. And also, although there are some exclusive provisions and so much money again has been allotted to this, very little is done in these big cities. So there is a need to pressurize the authorities and the concerned institutions and also the concerned agencies all around, in and around these kind of places. It could be schools, it could be religious institutions. They also should be become responsible and be part of it. He also mentioned the fact that Rorik Estate today, which is like a large space just on the outside of Bangalore, is empty, and it's become a place where garbage is dumped and nobody is there to take care of it. So whether it's a private or a government effort or ownership of the land, there should be concern and pressure from the citizens to ensure that these spaces are clean. And he also mentioned the fact that decentralization, that is at the ward level, people should become more aware, and they should pressurize at the ward level so that at every ward the concerned lakes or natural places of biodiversity will be protected. He also referred to all the green belt areas of Bangalore, for example, the Hesarghatta grasslands, which was recently in news. Then the Dabaspet, there was a Gram Panchayat project. Then he referred to the Nelmangla Hill project, which is being considered to be made into a biodiversity heritage site, where local people have taken interest, and a lot of rare plants have been planted and conserved there. He also referred to the Panerghatta National Park, which needs a lot more effort and support from the people. So basically, he referred to all the green belt areas. He literally took us all around Bangalore, actually, very beautifully. So he took us to Magadi area, where the TGLE area is completely spoiled today, and this needs to stop. He also referred to the many quarries that are abandoned, and wherever such activities are happening, it is important to bring it to the attention of the local BPMP or the taluk or the Zilla Panchayat, and people's pressure to ensure these places are all fixed. And he also mentioned about the Devnali area, where there is absolutely no agriculture happening, but everything is dry, lots of quarries there as well. And there is a need to rejuvenate as much as possible. Heritage sites have to be declared, and it can start by creating some models. So he referred to the GKBK heritage site, which has been created, and also the efforts that are going on near Bangalore University, where there is a small patch of forest to conserve it as a biodiversity heritage site. So, although there are nurseries everywhere and saplings are being made and distributed, the many parks in and around Bangalore was a very interesting point that he made. There are thousands of parks, but all these parks lack trees. They mostly have ornamental plants and grass. So, our work should be focused on ensuring even these parks have local trees, was a point that he made. And he concluded by saying that biodiversity is not just about planting trees and other things, but also ensuring that everything around us is protected: lakes, ponds, hills, small patches of forest. And he also referred to the fact that if at all some efforts that have gone on in these areas, mostly it is to cater to tourism. So he referred to Nandi Hills, where today you can only see roads and buildings. So he said this is not the way, but to focus on the natural ecosystems and to preserve them the way they are. So in and around Bangalore today, it's very important to clean up, and Bangalore, there has to be some kind of a sustainable development model. So it is the responsibility of BBMP along with various departments and the learned citizens to take this forward. And he said, in a small way, the Biodiversity Board is doing many little things to ensure that biodiversity is saved all around. Thank you. I hope I have done justice, Nima.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Bhargavi. Those who have questions for Mr. Anand, please share them with us in the chat box and we will address them at the end of the session. Our second speaker is Ms. Meera, the co-founder of Citizen Matters, an award-winning digital news outlet that covers critical urban issues, ideas and solutions for South Indian cities. She also helped initiate Open City, an urban data platform, and Co-Media Lab, a community newsroom and resource center for Bangalore journalists. Meera was named an Ashoka Fellow in 2016 for her work in community media. She was also selected an International Center for Journalists Knight Fellow in India in 2017, who reinvented Indian newsrooms storytelling around critical health, gender, and development issues by introducing new data and multimedia elements to their reportage. An experienced professional and entrepreneur with experience in technology, media, open data, she facilitates communication, engagement, and change making. Ms. Meera.
Thank you, Satvika. Thanks, ESG, for organizing this session, and it's a privilege to be part of this wonderfully diverse panel. So when we talk about commons, we normally refer to, streets, parks, open spaces, or even like forests and lakes. But I just want to bring in the idea of this third space, right? Third place, rather. And especially in this post-pandemic scenario. And it was coined by some sociologists. And it refers to a place which enables conversation, and it has regulars visiting the place. And it is accessible and affordable to a large section of society. And these are basically public places which are like, you have home, you have work, and then you have these third places. And it's important, especially in the current situation. And you will find, like, over the last few years, you've been finding, like, malls and coffee days and Starbucks becoming these third places, especially for young people who are, upwardly mobile migrant people. But historically, if you've looked at it, our commons are like, you have the lakes, you have the keres and the kuntes and the grazing lands, all of that. And you also had, cultural and spaces, community halls. For example, I don't know. I would call Janagar shopping complex a third place, right? It was a commons. You would find, like, every evening you'd find a lot of people sitting there, and not just shopping, but sitting there, just hanging around, meeting friends, talking, and so on. And earlier you would have these ideas of, Somari kattes or this Ashwath kattes near the temples. And but from that point, and then in the last century, you had all these new planned layouts where you had with had its planned parks and mini forests, and every block and every phase had these spaces, right? These green spaces. And that was really amazing about Bangalore. So till about 15-20 years ago, you could see that every neighborhood actually was very green, thanks to these little green areas within each neighborhood. But unfortunately, as the city expanded, we became from BMP to BBMP. We expanded into a mega city, over 800 square kilometers. You didn't find this kind of planning in the newer areas, right? If you go to Martali, for example, you will find like maybe 5-6 public parks. You will find a lot of like greenery maybe within apartments or gated communities, but that's not affordable or accessible by everybody, right? So how do you ensure that everybody in the city has access to these kind of commons or third places? And and not just about green areas or biodiversity field areas, but it's also important to have community spaces. And I again come back to this issue, right? We need playgrounds, we need libraries, performance spaces, museums. Imagine like a mega city with like whatever 12 million population, which has about a handful of museums, right? uh, and and even theaters, right? You can like name the theaters in the city. You'll have one Ranga Shankara here or one Ranga Mandira here. We don't have enough for the kind of population we have. And because these are spaces for like learning, we talk about co-working spaces, but we need co-learning spaces also, and spaces which are friendly for women and children to hang around. And we know, I mean, overall we know the need for like commons, and we know about sustain, and this particular audience, I know I don't need to get into details, the importance of commons in terms of bringing in sustainability, improved air quality, and just being a resilient and adaptable city. Unfortunately, our parks are not great examples of biodiversity or inclusion, right? Even Cubbon Park nowadays has apparently guards, and you have, of course, the focus is more on vehicles passing through. Um, and the other critical thing to think about when you talk about commons is this sense of well-being, right? Everybody cannot afford to live in a community which has green spaces, and if you're not in one of the older areas, you're not one of the middle class areas, you don't have that kind of access. And that is very, very important, and we've realized this in the last 1 year with lockdown and post lockdown. We've understood the importance of well-being and access to open spaces. And of course, the other thing that I know ESG has already pointed out earlier was about livelihoods and the informal economy, right? The bulk of population, actually significant proportion of the population depends on informal economy jobs like street vending, or they have this food carts and so on. And the other larger thing is also about this commons brings the city, people of the city together, right? It gives an opportunity to mix, and you're not just meeting people like us, right? Within your apartment community, it's about like having neighbors who are similar to yours, the children go to the same school. But in a public park, you will find people from a very diverse set of community, people from across caste, class, economic status, and so on. And that's very important for us to broaden our minds also. Otherwise, we are just limited and living in silos. And you see, like actually in Bangalore, there's a lot of segregation in terms of housing and within the neighborhoods also. So overall, yes, the commons has become an uncommon resource now. It's limited in access and availability, right? Remember during the lockdown, everybody is talking about hearing those birds, and there's a lot of oh, I saw this animal, or I went to the park nearby. And that kind of experience should be available for everybody in the city, right? When we this tragedy of commons is a common term in economics, right? But the tragedy I see here is the fact that the poor way we are imagining commons, and the lack of importance we are giving to this space. And we know the reason why, right? We know about the issues of governance and capacity, but I'm not going to get there, because end of the day, government reflects us. It is we, the people, who are electing them, right? Perhaps we failed in education, right? We've not talked about, children don't learn the linkages between environment, health, economy, and also about the way we behave and treat our commons, right? Mr. Hegde talked about Hesarghatta. When people visit Hesarghatta on a weekend, how do we treat that place? We go, dustic there, we go and harass the birds or the other animals. We don't know how to respect nature, so to say. And of course, in Bangalore, we can't escape this whole pressure of real estate, right? And there's a speculative, high growth sort of an industry. And unless we fix that issue, I don't think we can manage to really solve this problem, right? People are coming, like hundreds or whatever, thousands of people are coming into the city, migrants are coming into the city. And we have not over the years solved the problem of housing everybody in an equitable way, right? And people continue to live in like slums or tin sheds, and we continue building like huge housing complexes in which are like people are investing in it because the city is growing. And where has it led us, really? The other aspect is this whole concept of urban aesthetics, right? And we've come to a very perhaps westernized approach of manicured gardens, and we don't have fruit trees, we have these fancy palms in terms of design. So I think this has a huge role to play. You have kids actually talking about, oh, soil is yucky, I will walk only on tiled spaces and so on. So I think it's important to address that also, kind of, again, overall be much more open to a diverse range of what the definition of common is. And of course, there's this whole issue of budget. It's not like there is no money, but if you look at BBMP's budget, what it has at its disposal for nature, for greenery, for the commons is very, very limited. So, and where do we go from here? What could be the solutions? If you've read Eleanor Ostrom's work, she talks about this negotiations, right? Our master plan should account for decentralized planning, participative planning, but which of course now seems very, very far-fetched, because even public hearings are very, sort of rare, and the state is very reluctant to do much of this. But it must be done, and we really don't have a kind of choice about that. And we need the governance infrastructure, the framework that facilitates this. May not be in the context of large projects, right? You can't, suburban or metro, let's say the state decides or the city decides, but why can't the neighborhood, the communities be involved in where the stations should be positioned on the route, and what kind of facilities do we need there? Cycle parking, or do you want like a mini park next to it, and so on. And it's, again, Ostrom says, right, it's possible that a community of citizens can actually organize themselves, and solve this problem of how do you manage the supply, how do you find this commitment and monitor and ensure that the commons are taken care of. So I think it's very possible, but we just haven't built that system to facilitate all of this. And the other thing is, we also need to look at market and government sort of carrots or incentives for sustainable solutions, right? There's no like we force apartments which are anyway composting in-house to pay garbage cess. There's no difference in the way we treat somebody who's doing the right thing and somebody who's not. We don't encourage apartments for rooftop solar with enough of an incentive to reduce the ROI. So a lot of this, I think, needs to be, you have to, because at this point we are still, majority of people will still look at ROI and the economics of it, and it's also about affordability for individuals when you look at these kind of solutions. The other thing is, we need to sort of also, from a whole approach and mindset perspective, governments need to look at how to disincentivize gardens and encourage playgrounds and urban forest. And also, it's important to sort of open up the land. There is a lot of open land, privately owned, or even what the government has, various departments or agencies, they own a lot of land within the city, which are not accessible. Now, given that about the per capita green space in Bangalore is around apparently 2 square meters. It's like really, really ridiculous. And probably some of us have access to more, but majority of the people have access to even less of a green space. So I think it's very, very unfair to kind of tie in places, maybe open up just for the weekends, but we need to figure out some innovative way to open up open spaces for the larger citizenry. We can look at how to open up some of these empty land into, make them urban forests, and how do you encourage maybe urban farming. So I think it's now we've seen in the last year or two, especially, the huge challenges from a sustainability and climate change perspective. We've understood the importance of, for our own well-being, especially in the last 1 year post-pandemic. And it's time to think out of the box to figure out how we can fix it. We can't keep on complaining, and it's up to us. So, yeah, so that's what I had to share. And thank you, Satvika, for this.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for highlighting how important commons really are, why incentivizing public participation is important, and how much real estate has actually taken away rather than given us. Also, the point you made about how empty land should be used to convert them into parks or urban forests rather than disturbing existing ecology and ecosystems. Thank you so much for that. Those who have questions for Ms. Meera, please share them with us in the chat box, and we will take them up by the end of the session. Our third speaker is Dr. Subramania. He is a leading ornithologist and scientist and was a senior faculty at the University of Agricultural Sciences, Bangalore, from where he retired in 2018. Besides studying various facets of birds, he specializes in studying heroneries, wetlands, water birds, and threatened birds. He has been part of ESG's PIL effort in the writ petition number 817 of 2008, which is the Lakes case, and 38401 of 2014. As part of the latter litigation, he highlighted how Bangalore's loss of wetlands has contributed further in threatening survival of rare species that had flown thousands of kilometers from Siberia, Mongolia, and Eurasia over the mighty Himalayas in search of food and habitat. He has drawn concern to the pollution, encroachment, and over engineering of lakes into soup bowls that has destroyed their ecological vitality and diversity. His efforts presented in form of reports have been taken note by Chief Justice Oka as well. So thank you for being here today. Could you please? So you'll have to unmute yourself. It's on mute. It's on mute, sir. Yeah.
Go ahead. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
So we're unable to hear you.
No, I unmuted myself.
Yeah, it's better now. Maybe could you move the mic a little closer to you?
Okay. I just wanted to present about three aspects of biodiversity in Bangalore. One is about lake. Another one is about the proposed biodiversity park.
So sorry to interrupt. It's very faint. We're unable to hear you clearly.
Can you hear me now?
It's slightly better.
Can you hear me now?
This is better. Thank you.
Hello?
Yeah, much better.
Now? Hello?
It's a bit faint.
I don't know. Earlier, I think it was all right.
Very.
Can you hear me? Hello? I can hear it clearly, but I don't know. You said.
Could you try without the headphones? Maybe that should work better.
Can you hear me?
Much better. This is
okay. I just wanted to talk about lakes and in Bangalore, how they have deteriorated and whether we can bring them back. Secondly, about the biodiversity park that are being planned, because I was part of the committee which are put together to look at establishing biodiversity parks in Bangalore. And thirdly, on the biodiversity heritage site at GKVK, I was the culprit who got the area declared as a BHS. So regarding lakes, of course, I understand lakes. I'm not a lake expert in Bangalore anyway, because the problem with Bangalore is that there are more number of lake experts than lakes in Bangalore, and I'm not one of them. So I understand lakes through birds. And my association with lakes goes as far back as 1987, when we, a small group of bird watchers, started looking at water birds in our lakes. And what we used to do is that we used to travel within about 40-kilometer radius of Bangalore, visiting some 100 to 130 lakes, going around each and every lake and counting each and every bird. That we did between 1987 to 1996. So in that period, I must have done somewhere close to about a little more than 300 lake visits. And my understanding is based on how birds use these lakes and how the structure is very important for the biodiversity to be sustained in these lakes, and how things have changed from then to the present day situation, where I'm trying to battle against the lake development model itself, which is not biodiversity friendly. And we can usually visualize these lakes. Of course, I don't know how many of you have been able to go and visit lakes in far-off villages outside Bangalore. If you go and visit those places, you realize that these lakes are shallow basins of varying water depths, with the deepest zone very close to the bund. And as you move away from the bund towards the margins and also foreshore, the water level keeps on reducing. This creates a zonation, which is based on which a large number of aquatic plants grow. There are 4 types of aquatic plants: the submerged, floating, emergent, and anchored floating vegetation. And based on these areas, even the birds and other biodiversity. Can you hear me now? Is all right? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
We can hear you clearly now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's absolutely clear, sir. Hello?
Okay. So that's a wonder. Based on that, of course, we recorded about 110 species of bird that used to visit these lakes. And we used to have numbers, for example, Belandur, we have counted about 50,000 ducks. Hebbal used to have 8 to 10,000 ducks. And a huge number of waders, which use shallow waters. And also, even among ducks, you have 2 groups, the dabbling and also diving ducks. Diving ducks are fish eaters, dabbling ducks are surface feeders. And today we have lost most of them. We don't even get to see 10 to 100 ducks in a lake in Bangalore. The reason is that the habitat has changed. One is that along with the lakes, the villagers used to cultivate these the wetlands on the downstream of the bund. And that used to be one of the major feeding grounds for the birds that used to be found in the lakes. And in those days, lakes were being managed by the village panchayat, not the government, where village panchayat used to charge a cess to the villagers who would cultivate a crop of paddy in the downstream of the bund. And because of that, they used to maintain the lakes also. Once in 4 years, the villagers, the village panchayat, enlist 1 member from each family to deseed the lake. And the deseeded mud was being used as a manure in the dryland cropped areas. And because the lakes were being maintained very well, and in those days, we never had sewage entering into the lake. We used to have a vast catchment area around the lakes, and the water would flow freely into the lake from the surrounding catchment area, where the surrounding land would gently slope into the lake. And today the situation has changed. Most of the catchment area has been built up. The paddy fields have been bought up and built up into gated communities. And the lakes are being walled up, because the problem is that the present day lake development model is not biodiversity friendly. Because there is so much money to be spent, and they try to maximize on spending money over these lakes, but it does not help biodiversity. The very model is faulty. What they do is that because every cubic meter of soil that can be built, they try to maximize on desilting as much as possible. In the process, the lakes are getting developed into a soup bowl kind of a lake. And the old structure that used to be there is no longer there, which is biodiversity friendly. And also, when you desilt so much of mud, it attracts 2 costs. Transportation cost and also dumping cost elsewhere on somebody else's ground. But they don't want to incur those 2 costs, but instead they locally utilize the mud to create unwanted islands, because islands were never part of our lakes through the history. By creating, they call these as bird islands. By creating these bird islands, they think that birds will come and dance over them. It will never happen. And also they put a elevated jogging track, which is about 15 feet high and 30 feet wide, as if you're going to run marathons on these jogging tracks. And as a consequence, the water that would have otherwise come through the surrounding catchment area will never ever flow into the lake. And the only source of water that becomes to keep the lakes alive is a sewage. And also these lakes used to be a very seasonal lakes. They had a definite seasonality that they would get imported during monsoon, go dry by the middle of summer. Now, because of inflow of sewage right through the year, the lake has become perennial. In other words, what has happened through the years after the lakes are being developed in Bangalore is that the lakes have lost their structure and ecology. because of the lake development model and also perennial inflow of sewage. Because of this, the biodiversity has dipped. There is more than 90% decline in bird numbers in our lakes. So can you save these lakes? I don't think we can never ever bring back that biodiversity that used to be there before 1996. The lakes are more or less destroyed with respect to the biodiversity unless we get clean water, restructure the lakes into the old model. We can't expect biodiversity to be there in our lakes. Now coming to biodiversity, this one, I don't know whether Mr. Anant Hegde is still there. And I was part of a committee which was was set up to look into 3 areas in Karnataka for developing biodiversity parks. And these are all we were made to visit. We were taken there, made to visit these places and look at, give recommendation on how to create biodiversity parks. And the local DCFs made presentations. And when we sat through presentations, most of it was nothing but civil works. They wanted to big pergolas, yoga platforms, children play areas. And the area that was selected were also reserve forests. So one of the objections that we put was that, is that any what allows you to convert a reserve forest into a biodiversity park? Reserve forest is a higher category than the biodiversity park. The concept note on biodiversity park says that you need to set up biodiversity park in degraded areas and barren areas to sustain, bring up local biodiversity. And also, of course, under the areas that were selected was one was in Gendekate forest in Hassan, and there was a Thuralli mini forest near Thuralli, and the Jarakmande are the Avalalli forest. Avalalli forest is a reserve forest, and there's already been 2 programs that has already happened there. One was a tree park, another the butterfly park, and both were eyesore when we went there. We create tree parks and biodiversity butterfly parks, but we don't budget for the maintenance of those parks after the project gets executed and the bills are paid for. And what we insisted is that instead, of course, they wanted to bring in Western Ghats species and plant them in 3-tier system as walk paths, bike paths. So my question was that when you talk about biodiversity, we say that we don't want to plant native plants, non-native species or exotic species. But we fail to understand that Western Ghats species in a dry deciduous forest like Jarakmande is an exotic species. It's not native to that particular habitat. Even at mini forest in Thuralli, there was a small NGO which was looking after the area, involved with the area for nearly 15 years. And they said that we have conducted 12 tree planting programs through this area. Who gives us the right to plant trees like Gulmohar, Cassia, Siamia, others in a reserve forest area? What we insisted was that to sustain biodiversity, first you survey the area, get a floristic survey done, remove all the invasives, lantana, epitorium, Acacia catachu, some of those species, and revive all the old waterways. They build check dams, non-concretized check dams, and secure the area wherever the compounds have also been broken, and allow the nature to take care of itself. We don't have to bring in anywhere any plants outside the biodiversity, proposed biodiversity park areas. And instead, you identify which are the rare, threatened, endangered, and endemic species found within that area, and try to build up a nursery of this based on from the seeds that are collected from these areas. Raise a nursery, then raise the saplings to about 1.5 to 2 meters height, then plant those saplings in that area. That's exactly what we should do. We should only sustain local biodiversity, not bring in Western Ghats species and say that our biodiversity has improved in these areas. Lastly, coming to biodiversity at a site at GKVK, Me and another person spent about 1 year putting together all the documentation and to say what GKVK campus had to talk about showcase about biodiversity, and submitted to National Biodiversity Authority in Chennai, but they asked us to submit the proposal to Karnataka Biodiversity Board. At that time, when Mr. Prajapati was there as the additional principal chief conservator of forests, and he believed in us, and we submitted it. And of course, after a thorough review, it got declared as a biodiversity heritage site. But after that, no effort has been done to do anything to safeguard this biodiversity heritage site. Only one biodiversity management committee was set up when we submitted the proposal. After that, no committee has been, it has never been revived, or no management plan has been done. So if we are talking about biodiversity, sustaining biodiversity, these are some other areas that we need to look at. Are we going in the right direction in sustaining biodiversity by setting up a biodiversity park? And what is the model are we adopting? Is it the right model? And also, when you are talking about lake development, this one, when you already described the structure and ecology of the lake, what biodiversity are trying to planning to sustain in these lakes? So if you are setting up biodiversity heritage sites, how are we moving forward to maintain these biodiversity heritage sites? I took so much time, extra time putting and put together documents or documentation for the heritage site, and today it has not improved in any way. So these are my takes on the three areas, and I'm open for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, especially for highlighting all the challenges with the current lake models and explaining the science and importance behind sustaining local biodiversity rather than bringing in species from the Western Ghats. Again, those who have questions, please put it in the chat box, as we have people compiling them for us right now. Our fourth speaker and final speaker for today is Dr. Meera Iyer, who is currently the convener of the Bangalore chapter of the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, and also a partner in Canalian. Ms. Meera has a PhD in forest ecology from Michigan State University. She has worked extensively on conceptualizing research, writing, and design for interpretation of monuments and protected sites. Her work focuses on raising awareness and appreciation of the city's heritage. As an independent writer and researcher, she has over 300 published articles on heritage, is a columnist for Deccan Herald, and also an author of the book Discovering Bengaluru, which was published in 2019. With varied interests, including conservation, forest ecology, heritage, and culture, she takes delight in traveling to historical sites and spearheading preservation activities of natural and built heritage. Ms. Meera.
Thank you, Satvika, for that fulsome introduction. And thank you also for inviting me to be part of this panel, Satvika, Bhargavi, and Leo, all of you. Actually, I feel I'm a bit of a misfit here, but anyway, it's a bit of an, it's an advantage and disadvantage to be the last speaker, because advantage because I get to hear all these wonderful speakers before me, but disadvantage because many of the things that I was hoping to say have already been covered by others, including Meera especially. But anyway, I'm going to make a case. I've had to reorganize what I was going to say a bit. I'm going to make a case here for the importance of cultural heritage, which I have not heard. Some of you have touched upon this a little bit, but not really spoken too much about it. So let me start with, 2 years ago, there was this very interesting judgment that was delivered by Justice Raghavendra Chauhan, of the Telangana High Court. And this was a judgment in a case regarding the demolition of a 150-year-old building in Hyderabad. And in that judgment, he says a very interesting thing. He says that the government has ignored the fact that the identity and character of a city is defined by its heritage and architecture. Therefore, it's imperative for government to preserve, conserve, and restore heritage buildings of the city. And he goes on to say that while it's important to plan for the future, it's equally important to preserve, to protect, and to promote the past. So I couldn't have said this much better than him, and I'm so happy that this kind of sentiment is actually now gaining currency, but not enough. So because if you look at the city, the history of the city, it's like littered with examples. I'm sure all of you already know. It's littered with examples of how we have treated our heritage rather badly. So I'll just give one example because this audience probably already knows most of this, but a particularly wistful example, I think, is that of the Karaga, which is like it's considered like a city festival, and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people attend the festival, especially that the one ritual where the Karaga bearer goes through the city and he goes from temple to mosque to house to dargah and all. But what's poignant about it is that this festival, Karaga, is we hear about Bangalore being called Silicon City and Pub City and all of those, but here is a festival which is really celebrating a garden city and a gardener's city, because the Vanikula Kshatriyas or the Tigalas, they are celebrating their gardens, that is the city's gardens. And what's a little, as I said, it's poignant because the lakes that were such an inherent part of this particular festival, the Sampangiram, the Kere in Sampangi Nagara, that is now reduced to like a small swimming pool. And of course, this is not something that is only in the past, as Subramanya has been saying through his talk. Like, this is something that is still going on today because we still tend to look at our lakes as real estate more than anything else. So as I said, I think that the idea of cultural heritage is not really looked at enough. When we speak about sustainability, when we speak of climate resilience, we generally tend to speak about environmental aspects. We sometimes speak about economic issues. We often speak about economic issues and sometimes about the societal dimension, but we rarely ever talk about cultural heritage, but actually we should. So Satvika, you spoke a little bit in your introduction about the streets, and Meera also spoke about how the Jayanagar shopping complex, for example, was this Adda place. I've also been to that Adda place. I used to live very near there, still live somewhat close by. And all that is inherently a part of the culture of the city, which we are losing because we're not recognizing its importance. And that comes from not looking at heritage at all, because it's nowhere on our priority list. We're only looking at things in terms of economic value. So again, I'm sure this is something you all know. But in addition, so there are two aspects I will limit myself to why it's important to look at cultural heritage. One is as a reaction to something Meera spoke extensively about, which was public spaces in the city and how there are too few of them, cultural spaces, public spaces. So actually, many of our heritage spaces can double up and do double up as cultural centers and public spaces. So, for example, the Fort High School, which is a government high school, is also very, very well known for being the center of a cultural festival every year, the Ram Navami festival, which takes place there over a period of a month. Similarly, I think it's so we've just restored a few buildings in the city, including the Fort High School. We've also restored the building close by called the Octroy Post, which is within the police, Bangalore City Police premises. All of these have potential to be multifunctional spaces. Even buildings like, if you take Kabanpet Market or Malavali Market or Johnson Market, which are all heritage spaces, not just heritage buildings, but also they're important for the locality, but these can really be multifunctional. So why can't we look at having cultural events in Kabanpet Market? Why can't, it can be really an important cultural hub for that area. Similarly, the Malavali market, where many of the shops now are shuttered. That doesn't mean we need to demolish and rebuild. No, it needs a little bit looking at it in a different way. It can be used for other things. It can be used, you can have like the Kabanpet market, just outside the market, there's a very, very small reading room. Improve that, use that same concept elsewhere. So earlier, the Murphytown market used to have a reading center, which was unfortunately demolished. But that is such an important part of the lives of people living around there. It's such an important addition to their lives, right? So what I'm trying to say is heritage areas can be multifunctional. It's also unfortunately true that many of our existing well-recognized heritage areas are not accessible to the public. So if you look at the Bangalore Fort, for example, you can visit between 9 to 5, but you can't sit there. I'm not kidding. If you sit there, then the guard will come and blow his whistle at you and say, sitting not allowed. So we have a lot of problems like this, but I don't think they're insurmountable. I think we just need to keep asking for things, So like the Bangalore Fort is a recognized heritage monument, but what if we look at our other heritage buildings also as public spaces? So like Janta Bazaar, there's a huge area behind the building, which is currently used as a parking lot. But again, it could be used as other things. It could be used for, again, cultural events, for example. So that was one point. The second thing, I'll be very brief here. The second reason I think we should be looking at cultural heritage as an important part of climate resilience or sustainability of the city is because it goes back to what Raghavinder Chauhan said. It gives identity and character to the city. It's important for a sense of belonging for the people living in Bangalore. And we can have economic development, but economic development without cultural well-being is going to lead to a little bit of a rootlessness, and that's a bit of a failure. So, in order for people to feel part of something bigger, in order for people to identify with a city, which is so important for them to be participatory citizens, we need to preserve and promote our cultural heritage. So. I'll just stop with these 2 points here, but happy to take questions.
Thank you so very much, especially for such a different perspective and for telling us how heritage spaces can have a multifunctionality characteristic to it. So we have compiled a couple of questions based on what our participants have sent us. I think Mr. Anand has disconnected from the session. Is he there? No. Okay, so all those who had questions for Mr. Anand, we will send them to him via email and share his responses with y'all. The next question we have to Dr. Subramania.
Yep.
Diana asks, what do you think of aeration and bioremediation techniques for restoring lakes and biodiversity?
The moment you have these aerators and other things, you should say goodbye to birds. The disturbance that they cause will never allow any birds to be there. And you can do that to oxygenate the lakes, but I don't know whether it's going to be biodiversity friendly. Even the same thing goes for the lakes where they want to put out street lights in the evening so that they want to light it up. At least you can leave the biodiversity alone without having to brighten up the area after 6 o'clock in the evening. These are some of the things that we need to think about, whether we really, because as long as you can bring clean water into the lake, I don't know why you want to put aerators there.
Yeah.
Our focus should be on bringing clean waters, but we are not addressing that. For example, if you go to some other lakes which have STPs, you can still see raw sewage entering the lake. Then what is the point in putting aerators when you can't even take care of the sewage that flows into the lake?
Thank you, sir. Miss Meera from Citizen Matters. Nikita Neti asks, are there examples of tragedies of commons being turned into victories through citizen action in Bangalore? And additionally, what is the role of the digital commons in creating safe and learning environments?
See, Bangalore specifically known for this like much more evolved version of civic activism, right? Citizen engagement is fairly vibrant and strong, and there are these typical examples that you would have heard of, you know, Puttanalli Lake, Kaikanalli Lake, Ampalipura Lake, and so on. And these were the first few, and then over the years, you had a lot more lakes and parks being like managed by local neighborhood trusts and so on. But also the way this is panned out is it's like a, you know, it's always a work in progress, right? What is success? What is victory really? Because these communities, these groups are continuously like fighting to maintain it, or, you know, stop encroachment or sewage coming, and it's like a never ending battle, and it's very frustrating and very hard. How long can citizens take the ownership of raising money, managing the show? Like, end of the day, it is a state responsibility. While citizens can be custodians or, like, you know, volunteer and take care of it, but to put the complete onus of the commons on local groups is also not like a, you know, a scalable or a long-term solution. So where do you yeah, but there are a lot of learnings from there. There've been like many case studies you can find on how this was done and what the process that they followed, and this, it is possible to kind of have other groups, other communities and neighborhoods adopt these techniques to save, revive the commons. But yes, is it a long-term thing? I don't think so. I think we need to really relook at like what is the role of the city government in actually making sure that this, you know, our commons are available and managed and for all, right? So that is regarding like in terms of you know, good stories. In terms of digital commons in creating, I mean, that's a completely different question, and I don't know if you right now, if you look at, again, like Bangalore has a lot more in terms of, you know, data and documentation, and there's so many scholars who have studied Bangalore, right? So we do have a lot of understanding over the last you know, a few decades in terms of how things have panned out, how changes happened, and in terms of environment, in terms of the how the local communities are managing, and how civic activism and grown and so on. And yet it is also in a way limited, or if I can say, sort of in a lighter space. It's not like, I don't know if it is available in like multiple languages, accessible to all. So there is a limitation again there, I would say. Meera, you want to add? I think you probably know a lot more.
Thanks, Meera. No, again, I'm just going to echo what you said, because as you mentioned already, Bangalore is a city which has been which has a very active citizen involvement, including in terms of heritage protection. So going back all the way to the 80s, at least, when there was this move to save the High Court building from being demolished, which eventually led to a PIL, which was lost, but then the government changed its mind and then decided not to demolish the building. So yeah, it's and then of course, like 10 years ago, we had the Balabarui, and also, yes, it's been very active. But you're right, Meera, to raise this point of it being a little bit elitist. Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say, and that is something that, yes, we do need to address. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Meera, what is the status of landscape or ecological sciences based masters or development planning in Bangalore? Commons, cultural and natural heritages, third places, and similar values can be more readily addressed if we begin to acknowledge and apply these sciences into planning and design at different scales.
I think Subramania may be a better person to answer this question, not I.
Would you like to take that?
Satvika, can I come in before that?
Yes,
I just want to react to Meera from Citizen Matters.
Okay.
We talked about Kaikonhalli, Amlipura, Potenhalli. In all these places, we intervened when the lake was being developed. And Kaikonhalli Lake is what it is today because few of us, Harini, myself, P.R. Ramsuban, Ramesh intervened, engaged with the BBMP and made the lake from going the Subbol way. And even today, Amlipura is one of the shallow lakes. We maintained it to be a shallow lake. So by engaging with the authorities, without antagonizing them, you can still find a way to participate with them to sustain biodiversity. Okay.
Just to add to that, Dr. Subramania, that's very valid. But again, it also, I think, a little bit, there's a bit of luck that plays in it. It also depends on the kind of, officials and support that we get from the system. And there are other examples where, unfortunately, this has not been the case also. But yeah, in these cases, it was fantastic the way.
Yeah.
The government
Satish
worked.
was very amicable reasoning with us. Anyway.
Dr. Meera, Mr. Mysore asks, Indian Railway Stations Development Corporation have drawn up a huge plan in the name of protecting the heritage value of old railway stations throughout the length and breadth of India. In other words, commodification of precious lands in the midst of cities and towns and create concrete jungles.
Okay, so as it happens, INTAC, the International Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, so the Bangalore chapter of INTAC, we signed an MOU with the railways just about a month and a half ago to work on 4 of these railway stations in Bangalore, all of which are more than 100 years old. And I can tell you, sir, that at least in these 4 stations, we are not making them concrete jungles. We are not making them the other things that you said. So our purpose, and also in our discussions with the railway officials here, we're all quite clear that we want to retain the heritage character of those stations. So as INTAC, we will be restoring them. And I really don't think that those are going to be commodified. It's true that in other parts of the country, the railways have looked at seeing how they could commercialize some of the stations. But at least in Bangalore, these 4 stations that we are working on are not part of that. That's all I can say.
Any concluding?
Just wanted to.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Can I ask Meera about the railway stations? Because whenever we would go for censusing waterbirds at Dodjala railway station, we would pass by the railway station. It's one of the amazingly beautiful architecture that's still standing. Is that railway station a part of your restoration process?
Very much, very much. So we're looking at Dodjala, Devanahalli, Avatihalli, and Nandi Halt. And actually, Dodjala, Devanahalli, and Avatihalli, they all have extremely similar, like they look like carbon copies almost, except that one is built of brick and the other made of stone. So the architecture, it's not British. It's actually, I mean, it is colonial, but it's actually built by the Mysore government. But yes, that is definitely one of the ones we're looking at.
May I come in?
Nice to hear, because a 4-year-old boy, I used to take a train from Dodjala to Devanahalli.
Atyuka, may I come in?
Yes, sir, tell us.
Meera ji, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
No, today we had a webinar organized by the ASSOCHAM in association with the Indian Railways Station Development Corporation. I participated in that. I found that the entire game plan is to develop railway stations into commercial activities. They talk about the development so that it can take place as a matter of visit, play, and participate. That means it is being commodified. To the maximum extent, they want to make money out of the concrete the structures.
one thing that has creating problem in my mind is most of the railway tracks run along the length and breadth of the country on rural lands. And rural people have not been made parties or stakeholders for this kind of a development. They want to have their own say in the matter. Actually, most of the farmers who have given up their land for laying the tracks are left out in the cold. Is it not possible for them to include the class of people to create some sort of a cold storage or warehousing or restrooms for such unfortunate farmers who want to send their produces instead of throwing them on the streets for want of market, so that they can use those railway stations for some useful purpose? Any comments on that?
Yes, so I'm quite aware of what you said, sir, about the Indian Railway Station Development Corporation and the webinar that happened. And as I mentioned earlier, yes, there is this plan to commercialize some of the other stations, but I can only comment on the stations we are working on. I think your idea is good that it's essential that people who are living in the vicinity of the stations, their opinions and their needs need to be heard. And this is something that this is the approach that we are also adopting. We are going to look at in redeveloping these 4 stations that we are working on, we will definitely look at what it is that people living in the vicinity of the stations, what it is they think and what they need from those areas. But as I said, I can only comment on the ones that we are working on, and it would be good if there was local opinion taken even in the other stations, but that's all I can say.
Thank you so much for that. All the speakers, if you all have any concluding statements to make, then please, it's all yours.
There's a point in the comment by Shishir Raval, like he says none of the panelists addressed that. Which one is that?
That's all right. What we'll do is whatever questions are pending or have gone unanswered, we'll email them to y'all, and then y'all can address those separately, because we are running out of time. So we will definitely have the questions emailed back to the participants with the answers.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, as we wrap up the session, then I would like to once again thank all of our speakers for participating in and enriching today's discussion. I'm so grateful for all my colleagues also who have helped in putting this together. Thank you to all the participants. Please join us for next week's session as well, which is on making Bangalore energy independent, 26th of April, the coming Monday. Thank you all once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.